Chris Abel is here. All things tech. What is new? What is happening? Chris, great to see you. I appreciate you being here. And safe driving. You have my heart on this one. Don't get me wrong. We're all hypocrites of picking up our phone from time to time when we're driving. There was a guy, and you can't see us. Chris and I are on a video call. He was driving and texting like this in front of his eyes, going about 25 kilometers below the speed limit, and stopped at this red light, not texting. I don't know what he was doing, but it sure seemed like it was important to him, and keeping her between the lines was less important. It looked like an unmarked work truck, maybe just a dumpy truck. But that's what I think of when I think of unsafe driving in vehicles, in particular work vehicles.
Yes, this is a leading cause of accidents on the road. And so it's been a long time problem that we have to try to deal with. Tech companies think they have a solution, though, because as you pointed out, I mean, it's easy to get everybody to agree not to do it, but then to actually get them to stop doing it, that's a whole other thing. And so some tech companies have come forth with new technology that will allow companies whose business is to have fleets of drivers operating on them to come up with technology that will stop and prevent drivers from doing distracted driving. One of the leading companies is a company called Saver One. They're doing a whole new test with FedEx down in South Carolina and Philadelphia. What this involves is they take the company vehicles and they hide special sensors within those vehicles. There's 4 sensors and 1 receiver that's somewhere in the vehicle. They don't tell the driver. But these sensors can detect the presence of any smartphone within the vicinity of the car or the vehicle. And most importantly, it knows specifically which phones are belonging to the driver. So anybody sitting in the driving seat, the system can detect which phones are being used by that driver, not just their main phone, but any other phones that they may have on them. Because companies can hand you a company phone that can have all sorts of restrictions on it, but that's not going to stop somebody from bringing a second phone or a third phone. Well, this system will, because it detects whatever phones happen to be within the vicinity of the steering wheel. Automatically, it turns those phones into a safe mode. So now those phones can only receive and send through phone numbers, through text messages, and use apps that have been approved by the company itself. So in this case, FedEx. And so this is something that they're rolling out. They're trying it. Immediately, fleet managers have reported that they've seen some very positive results, and that before, their drivers would often be checking their phones up to 10 times an hour. And they say it's almost dramatically zero has been the result of this. For those who worry that, hey, I still might have an emergency or something, I may need to get to my phone. Well, the good news is if you stop your car and you pull over and you get out of the car, so you walk away, you're no longer the driver in the driver's seat, your phone will return back to normal.
Interesting stuff. CarPlay kind of does that, though, in Android Auto when you're driving. I mean, some apps get disabled, although it backfires. I believe it's Spotify, where you can't type in on Spotify while you're driving because it senses that. But so it says use Siri to search, right? But if you pick up your phone, you can open up the app and just type in your phone. So some of this stuff is pretty hypocritical. What you're speaking of sounds like a pretty well-balanced solution to shut it down.
Yes, and something that we kind of need. We have to recognize that it's just human nature. You're giving in to temptation, and we all need some assistance. And so this sounds really good. Now, this is rolling out initially for companies that are fleet companies that have entire fleets of cars, whether it be school buses or delivery vans. Hopefully, it is something that can extend forward and be offered to consumers. The big hurdle is making sure that you can get government to come in with regulations, but also the insurance companies. I mean, the insurance companies have done a great job in convincing people to put car alarms in their vehicles. Maybe they can help in putting this system in too.
Yeah, well, I hope so. You could be right. Okay, Chris Abel is here at Real Chris Abel, KrisAbel. If you have an old school tattoo that was done by a human, time to get that taken off. You need new ones.
Yes. So the very first robot tattooist now exists. This is in New York in a shop that's owned by tattoo artist Bang Bang, also known as Keith McCurdy. And he has been working with tech companies to solve the issue of whether or not you can get a robot or a machine to be able to do a tattoo and do it so that it's actually worth allowing a machine to do that to you. I don't know. I don't like giving any kind of gun, whether it's a tattoo gun or any kind of gun, to a robot. But in this case, What they're saying is, yes, you have the experience that you can sit down, the machine will clamp you down, you give it the section of skin that you want, and it will start to tattoo, much like a computer or a printer with the precision. So the image that is produced is really high quality. In fact, my only criticism is that it tends to look like a printed image rather than sort of an illustration, which I think is what we often associate with tattoos. But he said the big issue was that in the past, when machines tried to do a tattoo, often when the machine is printing, it's printing on a flat surface like a sheet of paper. Human skin doesn't react like that. In fact, when you're printing, the 2D image might be in your head or in the computer's mind. The skin responds as a very sort of unpredictable surface. There's lots of dips and valleys. And so where a human brain can constantly adjust, that's what an artist does when they're tattooing, a computer has to learn to do that. So the reason they're using robotics is that this robot known as Arrow has a scanning system. So it sits down and uses lasers to scan the surface of your body part, your skin, maps it right down to the micron. And so when it's tattooing, it's constantly compensating and changing for all the subtle changes on the surface of your skin. So the end result is actually very attractive. But again, I think there's a battle between what looks like a printed image and what should look like an illustration from by hand by a human artist.
I think they're missing the real boat on this. Let's be honest. Can it translate those international symbols to the right words before it puts it under your skin? That's really what people need to know. More importantly, next on the list is the F1 movie. Let's get that trailer here first so we can find out what it's about.
Right.
All right, so that movie was shot alongside the real F1 tour. In fact, if you watch in the movie, they'll see the F1 drivers standing next to Brad Pitt in the movie. Comes out next week, Chris, but there's some cool stuff happening in the background.
Right, so as you may have heard, there wasn't a lot of speaking in the F1 movie trailer. It was all the engine noises, the revving, the fantastic sound of the vehicles on the racetrack. So what Apple has done is they've taken advantage of the fact this is a movie that's presented for IMAX. So a lot of this is to give you the experience of what it's like to be in those cars, to be driving on the racetrack. Apple has released a special edition of the F1 movie trailer. This is only for iPhones, unfortunately, but if you go to the Apple TV app and watch it, it taps into the iPhone's haptics technology. This is the part of your phone that causes your phone to vibrate in response to apps, to phone calls, and things like that. It has caused the haptics to vibrate at the subtle frequencies that match every change of sound that you just heard in the movie trailer. So when you're watching it, holding the phone in your hands, it does feel like your phone, you're turning to the left, you're turning to the right, you're accelerating, you're deaccelerating. So a fantastic job from iPhone in terms of coming up with a special edition to promote the movie. I don't know whether they'll come out with a full version of the F1 movie for your iPhone. I actually think it would be worthwhile. Normally I would say no to watching something on a small screen, but because the sensation that you're feeling, driving almost, I think is really worthwhile.
This is cool. One of those vibrating chairs of the theater would be awesome for this movie too. I'm excited to go see it next week. Chris Abel, Real Chris Abel online for all the clicks and all the things. Thank you, sir, for popping in.
All right. Take care, guys.